Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure. I am still on holiday, so another visit to the vault from the extraordinary archive of interviews that we've built up over the years. Sometimes, I hope this doesn't sound self-congratulatory, sometimes I look at the list. I did it on the show the other day, actually, and I sort of think, blimey, that's a remarkable roster, and we continue to knock it out week after week after week. I was really looking forward to this one, and oddly, the more you look forward to it, the more conscious you are of the possibility of being disappointed. Happily, I was not. We're heading into the archive to revisit a conversation with the legendary Brian Cox. I know what you're thinking, which one? Because I've done them both on Full Disclosure. But this is not the astrophysicist, although that episode is in the archive. This is the actor who, somewhat later in life, achieved a new level of fame when he starred as Logan Roy in Succession. But I mean, he had several lifetimes worth of stories and experiences to share long before he moved into that sort of megastar status. And we talk about as much of it as we possibly can cram into an hour during the course of this powerful, often quite moving conversation. He has a clarity and a compassion that shine through, and his childhood in post-war Dundee was pretty bleak. I love the redemptive nature of theatre, the way that performing managed to free him, if you like, or rescue him from a path that would otherwise have been pretty unenviable. Shapes his politics, shaped his performances, and has shaped his perspective on success. If you did listen to it the first time round, I guarantee there'd be bits that you missed. And if you didn't, then, well, prepare to be gripped by a man who has lived a remarkable life and relates it quite brilliantly. Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project designed entirely to let me spend more time than I'd ever get on the radio with people that I find fascinating. And I mean, there's so much to get through with this week's guest. It's hard to know where to start. Let me begin by addressing all of the people who expressed disappointment when I interviewed Brian Cox, the physicist, because they downloaded the podcast expecting it to be Brian Cox, the actor.
Oh, well, there you go.
So thankfully, Brian Cox, the actor, is now here.
That's a pleasure.
So we've done the double.
Yeah.
Brian, it's a funny one, this, because we normally veer through the life and times of a guest before happening upon the latest project, if there is one, towards the end of the interview. But in many ways, your latest project entails your life and times, because it sees you go back to Dundee, where you grew up after the death of your father in relative poverty, and compare that with some of the things you've been exposed to while portraying one of the richest men in the world, Logan Roy, in Succession. So we'll just dive in and see where it takes us. It occurred to me, listening to you being interviewed by someone else, by John Wilson, actually, on the excellent This Cultural Life, that you are somebody whose childhood, you've always carried it into adult life. Was that always the case, or is it something you've come to latterly?
No, it's always been the case for me, because when I work with young drama students or work with anybody who wants to be an actor, I've always said, if we didn't have mirrors and for cameras, we would never know what we look like. Because we would always be, I can see my hands and that's it, but I never know what I look like. So in a way, I think of myself still as an 8-year-old. I mean, I've got a little photograph of me as an 8-year-old, and that's the guy I recognize as who I am. And I don't think I've changed. I mean, I've I've developed in many ways, sexually and every other way.
You've grown a beard.
But I've grown a beard, But I haven't really, that. And when I talk to young dramas, I said, that's in essence who you are.
Right.
And you never forget who you are. So always try and carry a picture of yourself as a kid. So you just remind, when you're having real difficulty, just take that photograph out and look at it a long time and look at that young face, whether it be a boy or whether it be a girl. And that will remind you exactly who you are.
Wow.
And what you hoped for when you were at that age.
And would you have said that to me in your 20s or your 30s? Would you have been conscious of it in your...
Not as conscious as I became, just through working and learning the job of teaching drama and teaching young actors. And it was something that probably came towards, probably my early 30s. It suddenly hit me.
It's like the opposite of that Robert Burns poem, isn't it? To a Louse, when he says, would some gift of power give us to see ourselves as others see us? Whereas in fact you're focusing on seeing yourself as you see.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the myths of Well, it's also to do with religion and all that, you know. I mean, I think religion gets tied up with self-judgment and, you know, and I think it gets in the way, quite honestly.
You mentioned being 8. That is formative, obviously, because of the loss of your dad. And it's a huge pivot in your childhood, isn't it? Because you go from being comfortably off to being really badly off.
Yeah, pretty badly off, yeah.
Were you a happy 8-year-old? I mean, were you happy up until that point?
Well, I was happy up until that point. And apart from losing my dad, which was a big thing for me, and also my mum's mental breakdown, because I did experience her trying to do herself in and stuff like that, you know. Sorry, that seems a bit glib, stuff like that.
Sure.
It's pretty major trying to do yourself in.
Of course
but
it is.
I wasn't unhappy. I was never unhappy. I just was dealing with what I had to deal with, you know. And I think that our sense of, you think of people who've been in much worse situations than I've been in, people who survived, kids who survived the Holocaust, you know, what have you, what they went through, what they had to experience, you know, which is nothing like my experience. So in a sense, I was never unhappy. I just was getting on with it. You know, survival is about surviving, you know, and I just learned to survive. I just thought, well, you know, I've got a life. I just have to get on with what my life is. Even as an 8-year-old, I was very lucky because of my vocation. That came to me very early on. So I knew that's what I wanted to do. So it was my objective, as it were, was to get to the point doing what I wanted to do. And I didn't know how to do that, but I just did it by being, you know.
It's almost, I mean, it lets you, gives you focus. It gives you direction, and that means you can somehow close out places your mind might go if you were meandering.
Exactly right, James.
Gosh.
I mean, that's exactly right. So you don't meander. You have singular of purpose, even as young as you are.
Were you a serious child?
No, I was a jokey child. Actually, yeah. I was a terrible show-off. That hasn't changed very much. I was a terrible show-off when I was a child. And
who was your audience?
You know, my audience were my pals. You know, the Lion Street gang, which was my gang. I lived in a ridiculous place called Brown Constable Street. Don't ask me why it was called Brown Constable Street, but it was called Brown Constable Street. And apparently, the rumor was it was based on an Indian constable that lived in the late 19th century. I mean, I think that's a nonsense. But so forgive me if I sound racist, but I don't mean to be. But it was just ridiculous. Anyway, the main thoroughfare was called Lion Street. So I was part of the Lion Street gang, and they were all my mates, and you know, and it was very. You know, I went back there recently to witness, because I was doing this program, and it was very depressing to see. You know, we still have the old poles, the old hanging poles with the lines that we hung our washing out. Oh. Now, in that day, and also we had a wonderful, huge concrete air raid shelter in the back garden, in the backyard, well, what we called the backs, which was shared by all these flats. And going back there, you know, it was so depressing what had happened, because the poles were standing empty, the lines were, but there was no washing. So there was no contact. And the other thing that I thought was really sad was that when I was a kid, we all had our name on the door.
Right.
You know, we went up to the various apartments, and there was Mrs. Robbie, there was Mrs. McGillan, there was the Watsons at the top, there was the Currys as well, and there were families. But now you go up, and my number was 19 Brown Constable Street. So it's number 1, it's number 2, it's number 3. Okay. So it's all been depersonalized in some way. And once you do that, you sort of depersonalize community. It makes people fractious. So it doesn't actually bring people together. And I think growing up post-war, the sense of togetherness was so much stronger than we've ever had it since.
And was there a sense of place as well?
Very much a sense of place, very much a sense of where you came from. Difficult as it was, Dundee was not an easy town. But the great thing about Dundee, and the great thing is the Dundonians, is the people. And the people have always out because the town has been, you know, the jute industry was pretty merciless in how it treated people. The jute barons and my family all came from Ireland.
But your mum worked in the mills.
My mum was a spinner originally. My dad was a batcher.
Places you astonishingly, doesn't it, in terms of of the passage of time,
Yeah.
to have a foot via your parents in the actual mills,
Yeah.
almost the kind of stuff that Blake was writing about.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
pretty bleak.
Yeah, and it was, it was a long time before I was born.
Of course it was, of
but
course.
that my mum, because we had the shop.
Yes.
And my dad, he didn't want to go into the shop initially. My mum did the shop, and she was pregnant twice with both my elder sisters, and but he liked the life of the mill. But he was very good at figures.
Right.
He was both him and my late brother had this ability to look at a row of figures and immediately add up. I mean, I can't do that.
You didn't have that.
I have no talent in that direction whatsoever. So in that sense, it was the community, and it was the sense of community that I didn't even realize. I only realized latterly what an incredible community and how lucky I was.
Because it's all you know.
Because it's what I knew.
So you presume it's normal.
Yeah, and you see it now being fractured
Yes.
more and more and more and more and more. And this is why I eventually did what I did. This program.
Yes.
That I did.
Yeah, which takes you right back. We should say it's called How the Other Half Live, and it essentially, as I mentioned, compares that to where you've ended up, or where the character you currently play has ended up, and trying to make some sense of those two worlds. It brings your politics into things as well, though, and your politics begin, I think, with your dad's shop, in a way.
Yeah.
And I love this phrase that I've heard you say, that he struggled with his socialism by dint of being a shopkeeper. It took me a while to understand what you meant by that, but you meant it's capitalism, isn't it, running a shop? And if people couldn't pay their bills, your dad's instinct, his political, his emotional, his moral instinct,
Was to take care of them.
was to take care of them.
Yeah.
Whereas your mum would perhaps be a little bit.
My mum was concerned.
Yes.
She was concerned about his generosity. I mean, a great thing was, to me, right from the word go, was Brian, remember, charity begins at home.
Yes.
And of course there's a lot of sense in that.
Of course there is.
But then my father was completely, I found this letter it was actually not a letter, it was an excerpt from her diary that she wrote the day my father was buried. And it was a beautiful thing. It was beautifully written. My mum really had great skill as a writer. And it was very loving and very forgiving, and yet at the same time acknowledging what she described beautifully in very 1950s terms as misgivings. They had their misgivings, which I thought was such a wonderful phrase.
It is a beautiful phrase.
For the differences. And they did, and she could witness them, but she also came from a fairly rough background. I only discovered about her father. Her father was he was in the First World War. We didn't know what had happened to him. We lost his military records, and I'd just done this thing called Finding Your Roots in America.
Yeah.
And I discovered that we thought he'd made it all up, but actually he hadn't. He'd been on the Western Front. Now, most people who did the Western Front for maybe 6 months tops. Yeah. He was there for 2 years, and that was pretty horrific.
Of course.
And it really kind of destroyed something in him. I mean, it's ironic that when he left, when he was discharged with emphysema because he was gassed. He had frozen feet. I know that he'd lost a couple of his toes. But then when he died, like less than 9 years after the event, after he died in 27, the war ended in 18. He died on his death certificate was bronchitis, and it clearly wasn't bronchitis. No. It clearly was as a result of what he'd been through, and he won a whole bunch of medals.
Wow.
Which we never saw.
So his heroism was what you thought he'd made up.
We thought we made it up, but they were all there. But and it seems to me that nobody ever saw these medals. So my imaginative thing is that there was an element of disgust, and he threw them all away.
Or he shut the door on the memories anyway.
He shut the door on the memories anyway.
Gosh.
So she came from that, and for instance, her younger sister couldn't stand her father, and she ran away at quite an early age. But my mother was the eldest, and she obviously had a closer connection with him.
Conscious of how easily things could be lost then as well.
Yeah.
Which would explain why she'd be more concerned than your dad with.
Absolutely. That's very well put. Yeah, exactly.
You don't have that. You didn't inherit that.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, because the great thing about being in the theatre is a sense of community. Yeah. It never changes. I mean, you meet actors after, you may not have worked together for 15 years, 20 years, and suddenly it's as if no time passed whatsoever. That's the great quality of actors, that they have that immediacy with one another. That they know that they're part of a brother and sisterhood, you know.
And there's an accelerating bonding process, isn't there? It's
Absolutely.
much faster than sitting next to someone in an office for a couple of years. You're together for 2 months,
That's right.
But you go to places that you rarely go to.
That's right, and because of the material you're dealing with and the great writers you're dealing with, you're really dealing with the material, and it's always challenging of your humanity.
Well, but before we get to the Vocation, then let's talk a bit about the new project, because as I say, it's so very much you, isn't it? It's so very much who you are. How the other half live is. Well, you came up with the idea yourself, I think. Or partly.
No, it was. In fairness, it was a guy called Tom O'Brien who came to see me, and I've been thinking about, because I love doing the show. I love. It's a great show to do, and it's a brilliantly written show by the writers and Jesse Armstrong. I love the show, but I was also, because I'm playing this horribly rich person, I just thought I want to get a perspective. I need to do something with some kind of perspective on that. I don't want to be, and also I don't even though I'm so identified now, it's ridiculous. I can't go anywhere without somebody asking me to use the words FO to them,
I may do that near the end.
On a constant level, which is tiring to say the least.
Yes, I'm sure.
But what happened was I was just, I don't know, it was so interesting because I realized that I needed something that was the opposite of that. And then Tom came and said, I'm thinking of doing a show about money. And immediately the light went on. Wow. I said, yes, that's the great divider. That's what we all have in common. And it's the thing we never talk about. It's the thing that nobody ever, people are ready to talk about the religion. They're ready to throw religion at you left, right, and center. And of course, we all have different religions. So it's there's a sort of bit of a discussion on that point. But with money, we all have fundamentally the same attitude. We need it to stay alive. Yeah. And there are some people who have it and some people who just do not have it and probably never will have it. And I just wanted to look at that and look at what that diversity was and how valid, we talk about it now because we're in such a bad state now with the inflation going through the roof. But I'm just concerned about the fact that we've never really attended to it. We make all these promises and we do all this thing and said, yes, we must do that. And it becomes tokenist after a while. We never really tackle the depth of the problem. And one of
which is inequality.
Which is inequality, which is deep inequality. Yeah. And, for example, the legitimization of food banks. Now food banks are regarded as, I had some MP, I can't remember of which faculty he was, but he was saying, at least they've got food banks now. And you go, well, that is nothing to be proud of.
Jacob Rees-Mogg called them uplifting.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, he would.
Yes, he would.
What an idiot he is. And we was less said about somebody like him and most of that party, the best.
You're right. The normalisation is the idea that...
That's right. And that's what I just couldn't bear. And I just
You played Knight Bevan, didn't you?
I did play.
Didn't he say the thing about charity being a cold heart? I think
That's
was it
right.
him? I think it was.
Well, he was one of the great inspirations. He was the man who created the National Health Service.
Yes, of course.
And we've had these amazing institutions which are the envy of the world, and we don't treat them with the respect they deserve.
Don't cherish them.
We just don't.
So you dug into this. You went back to Dundee. You went to not quite a food bank because it.
Well, I went to what was called a community larder, which is is where, because what they never understand is that dignity is important to the human soul. That the human soul has to have a sense of their own dignity. And when that is tread upon, as a system can do relentlessly, it needs to be established. So what these women who ran this playgroup did, and there's a lot more of them throughout the country now, called community larders. And what the community larders do, they charge. They charge the minimal. Like for £2 you can get tin goods. For £4 you can get tin and dry goods. And then for £6 you can get tin, dry and miscellaneous stuff. So that's what that's run on. And it was run by these two women who ran playgroups, who hit this idea that knew this fact of the loss of dignity. And so I interviewed people on that, about what they were doing, and it was very revealing. And what was particularly revealing, and I can't remember if it's in the show or not, because we originally it was supposed to be a 3-part program, but eventually we couldn't get the third part because we couldn't get enough rich people to talk.
Yeah.
It was,
Okay.
we could get endless poor people to talk, but we couldn't get enough rich people to talk.
Right.
So that made it difficult. So we ended up with 2 programs. But one of the things that was in the which was so revealing to me, was I was interviewing this man came in, and he was quite lame, and he had a stick, and he also had a sign on his arm, and he came in, and he so I was asking him, so I said, so this is for your family, because everybody was doing it for the family. He said, no, I don't do it for one particular family. He said, I work for about 15 families over a period of I do 5 families a week, and there are people who can't get here. They just have not the ability to get here, so they give me the money, and I come down and I do the shopping for them, and I take it to them. I said, you do this on a regular basis? He said, yeah, I do it. I've got these 15 people I work for, I said, well, that's amazing. I said, that's incredibly generous. And I said, so what's this here? He said, oh, I'm blind.
Wow.
And it still reverberates with me. I mean, it's just an astonishing act of heroism of this man who is blind doing this. And I said, so why do you do it? He said, well, if I don't do it, who will? And it was, it provides a full stop, really,
Did you, in a sense, you're doing journalism. It feels like a slightly inadequate term, but it's shining lights into parts of life that perhaps wouldn't otherwise be illuminated. Did you feel impotent ever? Did you feel...
Oh, yeah.
Was that difficult?
Very difficult.
Yes.
It was very difficult because I kept reflecting it back to me.
Yes.
And my situation, what I'd come to and how I've done and how well I've done over the years. Mind you, it's taken me 60 years to get on with it, And
better late than never.
Better late than never. And I'm now in my 70s, so so in a way I'm going, well, to a certain extent, I think, well, I've earned it,
yes,
because
of course.
I put the work in. But at the same time, it does make you think. It makes you consider yourself and say, am I spoiled? What am I doing? And that's why one does the programs, because you think the only way I can do it is by communication. The only way I can do it is by standing up and saying, you got to look at this. There's a problem here, and we're ignoring it. It's like this. So when Sunak and various people talked about trickle-down economics, it's bollocks. There's no such thing as trickle-down economics. There's only it is. Yeah, there is trickle-down, and it's a trickle that you get. Only a trickle.
Yes,
if you're lucky.
And that. I mean, I can see the 8-year-old again, because I'm sort of thinking, why would you bother doing this at this stage in your life when you've made it, when you're over the line, when you're home and dry? But it's the curiosity as well as the empathy with little you,
exactly.
with young you.
Yeah, and it is also to do with that memory of community and harmony.
Yeah.
And how we are no longer in a state of harmony. And the thing.
You're not being a bit rose-tinted about your childhood when you use words like that? I don't think you are, but I wasn't there.
No. I mean, no, we came through, the 20th century was a rough century.
Yes.
Because democracy wasn't alive until 1945. Did it ever really, it was 45 years before it came into place. And even then it was dubious, to say the least.
Incomplete,
yeah, that's a good word, incomplete. But that's what I also felt. And I felt that and that was a blissful time, because it was a time, and it was I remember the coronation vividly. I remember all of that. My dad did the whole party for our particular neighborhood, our Lion Street neighborhood. And, that was... he did that. He made sure that everybody celebrated. And there was a lot to celebrate. Yeah. And I remember standing on, my friend David Strachan's mum and dad, Ella and Davy Strachan, they're the only people who had a television. Yeah. So we stood on the stair, all waiting to watch our 5 minutes of the Queen.
All the way up,
and go up. We got 5 minutes, then we went. The next person came in. But that was the sense of community. And there was a real strong, it was something very vibrant. And something that was, very... had a great sense, a great outlook.
Yes, of course.
And that outlook was not realised,
I want to ask, I said we'd jump around, so let's jump around. So when your vocation kicks in, though, you must be conscious immediately that you have ambitions and aspirations far beyond this community. A lot of people comfortable within it, tempting never to leave it, but not for you.
Well, it was, because even as a child, I had a, sense of curiosity more than anything else. I'd look at the Tay, and it's a big river, the Tay, and I would think, I'm going to cross that.
Right.
I'm going to cross that one day, and ultimately I did. I mean, I was, again, blissful, but I knew that there was a world elsewhere.
And you wanted your place in it.
And I wanted to find where I'm supposed to be in it, and whether it's, whether it's a valid thing,
There was nobody telling you to wind your neck in, to know your place?
No, not at all. Well, it got a bit like that when I returned to Scotland. What was great was the 60s. Nobody understands what the 60s was like. Nobody understands the freedom that was there, the fact that of the social mobility of the 1960s, where you were welcomed. People were welcomed to come. I was welcome to go to drama school and I had an accent you could cut with a knife. But I was very, very welcomed, and it was the best time. To come to, and then of course there was the first Labour government. There was the first Wilson government that happened around about the same time. With
just the sense of what was achievable must have been intoxicating.
Exactly.
And you were riding that wave.
I felt that. I felt that I was part of a, and especially working at something like the Royal Court, which I did in the early days, and that theatre represented that, very much represented that kind of visionary. It was a visionary place.
Where then? To back up slightly, when did the vocation kick in? Was it a bookish household? I know that after you lost your dad, you were and your mother was very poorly. You were essentially raised by your sister. Where school? I think St Michael's Junior Secondary. You lasted there until you were 15. Where did the first sniff of the grease paint come from?
The sniff of it came from the Scots' ability to celebrate.
Right.
Particularly New Year. Hogmanay. I mean, they all get as pissed as farts, but, but at the same time, there was this, everybody did a turn. Everybody did a song. Everybody contributed. So everybody had a performer. I mean, we're all actors. I just think everybody's an actor. Whenever you go into a situation, you put on you put on something in order to deal with the situation. So that's basically fundamentally what acting is.
And yet authenticity is the hallmark of the best actor. There's a contradiction there, in a way.
Yeah, but there's nothing more authentic than the attempt to try and do something.
No, of course. Okay, so you discovered this.
Well, I discovered it when I was 3. It was my dad again and my sister. My sister she's 90 now, but she has a wonderful singing voice. And so at New Year's she'd be singing, and everybody loved May's singing. They were all very excited about it. And then I'd be brought on at 1 o'clock in the morning. I would be sleeping in, our flat there was 2 bedrooms, and my 3 sisters were in 1 bedroom. They all got married 2 of them got married quite quickly, and the other one went to Canada. So they were there, and my mum and dad were in what they called the wee bedroom, and then my brother and I slept in the kitchen alcove bedroom, where the bed was in an alcove in the kitchen. So that was it. And except on New Year, we had to clear out of the kitchen. Because
everyone's in the kitchen.
Because everybody's in the kitchen. So I slept in my mum's room. So they'd wake me about 1 o'clock, and I'd come out, and I would do, I would sing. I would do Al Jolson impersonations at the age of, I was 3. And I would do this with the actions. I mean, I didn't do the blackface, didn't do any of that, but I did the whole thing. And I just remember what happened to the room. The dynamic of the room changed. There was, everybody drinking, but there was this focus. And I just thought it was so palpable you could cut it. Just this kind of, I don't know, the ability for human beings to focus as a cohesion. Which is why I'm a socialist. And I just thought, this is an extraordinary thing. Human beings are surprising. They're full of contradictions. But when push comes to shove, there's something that can bring them together. And one of the things is performance, brings a focus. And I thought, that never left me. And that was the thing and of course, being an actual show-off, it kind of...
It's more than showing off.
Well, it's more than showing off, but as a child.
Of course.
From a child's point of view. But it's also to do with...
And was it nurtured once you found it?
Once it was nurtured, initially it was nurtured by extraordinary things, not by anything educational.
Okay.
But by by remiss. For instance, I had a headmaster at my primary school who he would need what we call in Scotland messages, errands. He would need somebody to go for errands for him. And one of the things was to get a stylus for his gramophone that he had. He had a Philips gramophone. And I would be sent off because he would look around the class and he said, I want somebody to go for a message for me. Could someone go? I need and I would put my hand up and say, I'll go. So this was part of my education. So I would go off and I would wander off into the town, have a wonderful time, finally go to Largs, which was the shop, and order the stylus. And then go, but I'd waste the whole day. My education was going down. So as a result, I failed my 11 plus.
Right.
It was a disaster. But I was smart. I kind of knew I was smart, but I wasn't scholastically smart.
And there was presumably not a great deal of pressure on you at home to do your homework or anything like that.
No pressure at all. No. Not at all. I had no parental help whatsoever. Sure. I was none. Absolutely zilch. And therefore, my education was pretty horrible. I failed at everything, except I succeeded in some things, but I usually got marks taken off for untidiness.
But you knew roughly where you wanted to be heading then already.
I kind of did. I'm very fortunate. I realize how blessed I am when I look at people who struggle with knowing what they want to do with their life. I've never had that problem. And also, you magnetize people. When you're in a state, people come to you. Like there were two teachers at St. Michael's. There was a guy called Bill Dewar who really introduced me to the theatre because I didn't know about the theatre. And then there was a guy called George Hackett who was my registrar teacher, who was a wonderful man. And he just took care of me from a distance. And these two men, I realized, were very important in my life. And as older I get, I realized how important these two guys were because they were able to clear paths for me, that I could go down a road and find something. And with Bill, it was, being a member of the Rep Club, going to the Rep on a Wednesday afternoon at the age of 14. And I went, and I'd never seen live theatre. I didn't know anything about live actors. I didn't know even such an animal existed in the theatre. And the theatre was always regarded slightly as a sort of relatively middle-class pursuit. Okay. Well, it wasn't as liberated as it became in the 60s. My auntie Kathy used to go there. She was very, very, very kind of a middle-class aspirant. Yes. So,
a touch of the hyacinth bouquet.
Yeah, exactly. And they used to, Anthony Page, who was the director of the theatre, called them the felties, because the women all wore these felt hats.
Did either of these teachers, did you keep in touch with them? Were they aware of
bit, but George,
your success?
George went to. I had a wonderful thing recently. I went to Australia recently, and sadly, I wanted to meet George, but he was into his 90s, and he passed away. I missed him by about.
But they'd have been aware of what young.
Yeah, they were very aware. That's lovely. And Bill Dewar died quite early on, so he didn't. But George was there, and in fact, what was so wonderful was that George's son is an artist, and as part of the celebration of not the celebration, but as part of the mourning process of their fathers. But there was also a celebrant of his life. They had these little busts made of him. Tiny wee busts, and actually in some of the busts they put bits of his ash in the bust, and they gave it to friends. Yeah. I didn't get the ash, but I got the bust. And there was George in his 90s, but I could still see the young George I knew.
Oh, that's nice.
So I've got that back home, and this is from a recent trip.
I must just tell you briefly why I asked you that question. Is because Alan Johnson, the Labour politician who's an author now, was sitting there a couple of weeks ago, and he told me a story about the teacher in his life who was incredibly influential and formative, and he tracked him down after he'd been Home Secretary, after he'd made it to say that, and the teacher had no idea who he was, had no memory of him whatsoever. So you're lucky in that sense.
No, I was very lucky on that count.
And it happened quite quickly. So you leave school at 15, obviously not a great loss by your own account to academia.
No, and certainly not from their point of view. They were happy to get rid of me.
And there was Rep in Dundee at the time, and you slotted in quite...
Yeah, well, again, Bill Dewar got me the interview, so I was very grateful to him for that. And it happened to be that, again, circumstances. Circumstances play so much in one's life.
Serendipity, isn't it?
Yeah, serendipity. And he had a young man who had been a my school, and he'd gone down my road, and he had worked at the Rep. And his job was going. He was going to drama school,
right.
And his job was free, and it was a general factotum job. But basically, it was do what I used to know how to do, which was to go errands. I was very good at errands, and they would trust me, a 15-year-old boy, with the night's takings, which I took to the bank every day. And I thought, why did they trust me on that? I could have done a runner, But I used to take the money to the bank, and then eventually, after a while, they allowed me backstage.
And then on stage at all, or did that?
No, I started. I was very lucky, actually. There was always tiny parts, like walk-on parts, that I would play, and I would show quite imagination in playing these roles.
Would you be conscious of trying to make a little more of your role?
Oh yeah, exactly. I would do. I remember I did the sort of Paperboy and Picnic, and I put blonde highlights in my hair. It was kind of weird. I mean, really strange stuff. And then eventually I sort of, and I would take care of the actors. And, one of my funny things was the late Lynn Redgrave, who just left drama school. She was at Central, and she came up to play Portia in Merchant of Venice. And after the first night, she couldn't find her wig. She'd lost her wig. And I was sent on a mission to find her wig. And I found her wig. It was in a wastepaper basket by her desk. She'd taken it and thrown it in the wastepaper basket. So I took the wig, and it was in a terrible state. So I went to the stage manager. I said, "What do I do about the wig?" And he said, "Well, see if you can get it fixed." I said, "Yeah, but we haven't got any hair department here." So I went and bought this thing called, I think they were called Carmen Rollers. And I set Lynn's wig. Every night. Amazing. Well, not every night, every other night.
Whenever it was necessary.
Yeah.
There's no sense yet, Brian, of it feeling like a citadel that would be hard to breach. There's a sense of quite natural progression.
It was very organic.
That's incredibly lucky.
Yeah, it is. I think it's because it started so young.
Right.
And I had the vision of it so young. And I never bothered about it. I just got on with my life.
Yeah.
I think I was blessed. I think I was remarkably blessed in terms of where I could place myself and how people could place me, and how people like Bill, like George, who saw that I was a fish out of water, saw that I was in a school which was so technically oriented. And I mean, if you saw my boats that I made in the carpentry shop, I mean, they wouldn't last for a day in the water. They would immediately be sinkable.
And yet you knew you were good at it. You knew you were good at this.
I knew I was good at it.
Not just that you liked it, you knew you were good at it.
I knew I was good at it. I knew I had the ability, and I just needed to learn,
Which is why you say sights on Lambda. Presumably, did you audition for all of the schools?
No.
Just Lambda?
No, I was very influenced by this woman who sadly passed away last year. She's called Kristen Linklater, and she was a voice teacher, and she's written a lot on The Voice. And she is the sister of Magnus Linklater, who was the editor of The Guardian, I think the Scotsman as well. And I think the Scotsman, I'm not sure it was The Guardian. Anyway, she came up to Dundee, and the guy who was I worked with three directors mainly at Dundee: Piers Haggard, Tony Page, Piers Haggard, and a guy called Bill Davis. Now, Bill's interesting because he's Canadian. He's famous now, Bill, though he still is basically he sees himself as a director, not an actor, but he's been acting. But he's famous for playing the smoking man in The X-Files.
Oh, gosh.
And Bill, he was the director of the theatre. He said, "Look, we've got this young woman coming up from Lambda," and that was the first time. And I said, "Lambda?" He said, "Well, that's where I went to school." And he said, "She's coming up. She's going to do some voice work." And I had no idea what voice work was. And she said, "We'll have a voice class. Would you like to come?" I had no idea what that was. And I said, "Sure, I'll come. Yeah, I'm fine, anything." So they included me. And that was the other thing about them, that I was included. And that was why it was never... It really was egalitarian in that sense.
It's a huge recurring theme in your life, isn't it? This sense of being part of something bigger.
That's right, and valued it. So immediately they said, "Okay, come up," and I went to this voice class, and of course it changed me. I just thought, she works on this woman called Iris Warren. It's the method of how you, and it's all about your breathing. It's the most fundamental thing, and how you breathe and how it comes. The voice comes through the vocal cords, and the less strain you put here and the more attention you give to this, the diaphragm, the voice works for you in a way, which means that you don't lose your voice. I mean, I've lost my voice because I've overused it, particularly if I've been away and then I come back and I do I remember going to Turkey once, coming back, and I felt great, sun and everything, and I did a night of Titus, and then the following day I couldn't speak because I hadn't warmed up properly.
Right.
So and I thought, that's where I want to go. I want to go to that school. And that was the only school I have in mind. And I did an audition. I got in.
How old were you when you got there?
17.
Gosh. And I mean, that is a culture shock, isn't it? To go from albeit that you'd had an exposure to
well, I'd been exposed to the theatre.
But not to London.
No, London was...
Away from home for the first time?
Away from home, you know. I mean, first night I slept in a bathroom, I remember. Yeah, I mean, it was weird.
And you got stuck straight in?
I got stuck straight in, and then I was, you know, there was a wonderful guy who ran the school called Michael McCohen, who's a great visionary, and great teachers, Norman Ayrton, and a wonderful woman called Patricia Arnold, who did movement. So I was very lucky.
And for the first time you have peers now. Did you find your tribe? I mean, I know you felt part of a bigger community at various stages in your life, from the Lion Street gang through to Rep, but did you feel now that you were with your people? Or?
Yeah, I felt very much this is where I should be. You know, I mean, I immediately felt at home. You know, and that's the thing about the theatre. I mean, it is, there is this feeling of being at home, you know.
And how ambitious were you?
Oh, I was very ambitious.
Were you?
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the problems that I had to deal with, was my ambition. It was my great spiritual mentor, Fulton Mackay, the Scottish actor Fulton Mackay, used to say, "Oh, Brian, don't worry about being a star, just be a good actor." And it was the best advice he ever gave me.
How long did it take you to take it?
No, I did it quite quickly, actually.
You did?
Because I was getting, you know, I had great early success. I mean, my first West End appearance when I was 21, you know.
What was that?
It was As You Like It, from Birmingham Rep. Yeah. So and then I did a wonderful play with Alan Bates and Jimmy Bolam, which we filmed, directed by Lindsay Anderson, and Fulton actually was in that as well. So, but I knew Fulton from before. I knew from when I started. I started at the Lyceum in Edinburgh. I went back to Scotland and started there, and had a year, and then I went to Birmingham, and then Birmingham is where I started playing I played these roles before I was 22. I played Iago, Mercutio, Peer Gynt, Bolingbroke, Orlando, all before the age of 22.
So you came out of the blocks at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I was terrible on all of them, probably.
No, of course you were.
But you know, but that was part of it.
So the advice that Fulton Mackay gave you then was really addressing a desire to be a star rather than an actor.
Yeah. I mean, because you've got that, you know, you've got,
of course
you know,
you know.
I mean, and especially for me, because my influence right from the word go was the cinema. You know, it was the movies. I mean, it was the pictures.
So that was in your sights.
And the pictures was already there. You know.
As a complete aside, because If is my favourite film of all time. What was Lindsay Anderson like to work with?
Fantastic. He was a wonderful director. He was difficult. He had his own demons, as it were, which he never. There was never a disclosure about his demons. He was just there, but he was such an observer of the human condition. He really did, you know, because he started as a documentary maker, so that was his great gift. And then he made these films like The Sporting Life, which I think is a great movie. And it's the big break for Richard Harris, you know, and so that was a fantastic film. And then, working with him, when I did work with him, and I worked with him in 1969. We did the play, and then later on, 5 years later, we did the movie. You know, and it was, he was just amazing, Lindsay.
So, does your career then go in stages? Because you talk about that very early success, and then by 2007, the UK Film Council is telling you, you're one of the 10 most powerful British film stars in Hollywood. 10 years before that, you might have popped up in an episode of Sharp. Then you've got Hollywood. It's almost impossible to how can I put this? It's almost impossible to knit a thread through your career. It's not a gradient, is it?
Well, it is a form. Well,
it's more of a heart machine.
No, there does come a point in in one's career. It's a horrible thing. And does it come a point in one's career? There did come a point in my career where I had to reinvent myself.
Right.
So there's a process of reinvention which takes you back. That means that the curve isn't a direct curve.
Okay.
So you're constantly, and that's important because I look at actors, and no names, no pack drill, wonderful actors who stayed too long at the fair.
Okay.
Who should have moved. They could always go back, but they should have moved because maybe they were at Stratford too long, or maybe they were at the National too long, or maybe
That's the key to understanding what I just asked you. There.
And therefore, I thought, get in, get out. I'm a bit of a commando in that way. You go in. Hopefully you score, sometimes you don't, and then you get out.
Okay.
And you wait for the next impetus to come along.
And something that excites you is not going to be the thing you've been doing for the last 5 years.
No, it's not going to be.
But you can always go back to it.
That's what, the thing you've done for the last 5 years never leaves you. That's always there.
Of course.
I mean, that's always in reserve.
Yeah.
And all that stuff you keep in reserve, and so it feeds you.
In many ways, we're back to the curiosity that's driven you since childhood, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're back to the sense of wanting new experiences and new things.
Yeah, and that hasn't changed, which is why
Which is why you've done the new project.
That's right, and it's exactly that. It exactly comes to that because also, and everybody goes, "Oh, here you are now," and it's very hard, playing Logan Roy because everybody knows who I am.
Yeah,
and
is that the first time?
More or less. I mean, people always sort of, weren't you in, that went on.
Okay.
But now I'm known for the man who says, fuck off, all the time. So, if my mother knew that would become my catchphrase, she'd be doing backflips in her grave.
Oh, no. God, the shame.
The shame of it. So it's kind of weird. But again, it's only a stop.
Yeah, of course.
For me, it's not the end stop. It's just... there's the Logan Roy years. This too will pass, and hopefully I'm still around and I've still got enough capacity, brain capacity to go on.
Let's just pick a couple of things that people would be fascinated to know more about. I mean, you talk about Stratford, and you were in Lear when Olivier was playing there. You played the Duke of Burgundy.
I did. That was on the television, yeah. I was supposed to play another part. That was for another great director in my life, who's the father of Marianne Elliott, Michael Elliott, who was a genius director, absolutely genius director, who then very bravely, he'd run the Vic at one point, and he was part of that. He then moved to Manchester, to the Royal Exchange, and created the Royal Exchange in Manchester, which was a pretty formidable theatre, particularly. Sure. It still is, but it was particularly formidable in its inception, which was really in the mid-'80s.
Yeah, Robert Lindsay's been on, full disclosure, and he was very much part of that period,
Robert did a lot up there, He did his Hamlet there everything. And but Michael was a great influence for me. He was just a man of incredible integrity, fierce, and kind of, sort of, his father was the Buckingham Palace's dean. He was St Michael's. He's named after St Michael's, Chester Row. He was a minister, and very, very very big kind of sort of influence on Michael, and that sort of purity of vision.
You sound almost like a magpie when you talk about people, in a good way, in the sense of what you can learn from them and what you can take from an encounter and a relationship and a working.
It's so important. It's so important that I don't mind that magpie thing because it's how you learn.
Yeah.
And there's no.
But you teach as well. So
I do teach.
It goes.
But yeah, but there's no one way. There's a series of routes. There's a series of routes you can take. And there's a series of spiritual paths you can take. I'm all for pursuing anything if it's self-improving, if it's meaning that you're still with you're still with the program. And you're not going off at some kind of, and that's what ambition does. Ambition, the wrong kind of ambition, kind of takes you away from really your essence. That thing that is in an 8-year-old child.
Was there a point at which you thought, I'm okay now? At which you thought I'm because to begin so quickly with such amazing work, did you get too early a sense of security? I know actors always answer this question by saying, I never feel any sense of security, but you're never going to be going to the workhouse, are you?
No. I never. I did. I mean, you know, it's hard to describe because it's not stable, but that's also why you love it, because of its instability.
Okay.
You know, but it's possible.
Was there a sense, I've made it now, ever? In professional terms, did you ever have that?
No, I mean, I knew I was doing well.
Yes.
But I never got to the point where, because if you say I've made it, you immediately put an end stop on something.
Again, it's that constant moving forward.
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's about moving forward all the time. You don't end stop anything. You know, and that's why, you know, somebody like Logan Roy is not. It's a stop on the career, but it's not an end stop in itself.
Yeah,
you know?
and that, I mean, that keeps you grounded as much as
Well, it
anything
does,
else, and it keeps you fresh. And it was fascinating hearing you talk about how the other half live, almost as part of the process of playing Logan Roy. It helps you put in a better performance when you've got some sort of better. So you talk about self-improvement. That can be understanding things. That can be a method of self-improvement. Just having a better understanding of how someone can live with epic wealth, for example.
That's right. And of course you learn. And what was very important for me, and what was tough for me about doing the program, was judging, because I could easily, because of where I come from politically, I could easily start to judge, but you can't do that.
You're very generous to some of the very, very wealthy people that did agree to speak to you.
Yeah, but I think one has to be, because in a way they're more fragile. It's very interesting. Yes. They're as fragile as somebody who is extremely poor.
Yes.
You know, and you go, what do you mean they're fragile? Well, they're fragile because they know that they've done it. I mean, like John Caldwell, for example.
He's the car phones guy, isn't it?
Yeah, so he was fascinating to me because, and he's a man that I could have easily gone in full judgmental.
Yes.
I could have easily done that. But that would not have been helpful. And what interests me as an actor is what motivates you.
Yeah.
What does it come from? Where does it come from? And you have to understand that some people do have entrepreneurial spirits. Now, John Caldwell, for example, he sold comics out of his backyard, out of his back window, when he was 6. He would sell his comics. And then he would say to his pals, what do you do with your old comics? They said, well, we just throw them. Well, give them to me. And of course, that's where his entrepreneurial skills finally led him, because that's what he believed. That was his raison d'etre. And you've got to respect that. I mean, you can judge it all you like, but you've got to respect the fact that people are motivated by not what is obvious. They're motivated by usually circumstances where there's always an element of deprivation, of whether it's deprivation of the spirit or deprivation of the soul. There's an element that drives you forward.
So if there's a mystery that you're trying to solve with the show, it's how these two states can coexist in the same society.
Exactly.
And that's the answer.
That's the answer. And also, it's not a good answer.
No, of course it isn't.
It's a bad answer, because you realize that some people, you know, it's like, I'm lucky because I knew what I wanted to do. But I know people whose lives have been so unhappy because they didn't know what they wanted to do. You know, they didn't have a vision of what their life could be. And one cannot be judgmental on that. One has to be understanding and kind and realize what your life was isn't what everybody's life is, you know.
We're back to your dad a bit, I think, because when people couldn't pay their bills and your mum would think that they were possibly taking advantage, your dad would reach for an explanation from their lives that accounted for why they were who they were.
And the throwback, the comeback rather to that was like recently. Well, last year I'd written this book and I was in Dundee promoting it, and there was a man who was in his 80s who stood up at this in Bray Ferry, and he said, "Your dad was so kind to me when I was a kid. And he gave me so much care and attention." He said, "I'll never forget it.
Gosh.
I'll carry it with me to my grave." And you go, that was my dad. Yeah. That was what my dad gave another human being. You know, I mean, a journalist in Dundee, Lorraine Wilson, her parents were struggling, young couple struggling. My dad helped them out. And my dad would go and decorate somebody's apartment, an old couple's apartment, after he finished work at 10 o'clock at night. Drove my mother crazy. But that's who he was. You know.
What would he have made of who you've become?
Well, I think he'd be rather pleased.
I would hope so.
I think he'd be rather pleased because I don't think I've forgotten who I am.
Well, you clearly haven't. I mean, the 8-year-old is in the room with us now.
Yeah,
isn't he?
he's very much
He's
so.
never left it.
He's never left.
We should talk a bit about this astonishing current chapter. Did you have an inkling when you first saw Jesse's script that this was going to be absolutely huge?
Well, you're very lucky if you can see Jesse's script at all.
Is that how it works?
Yeah.
You just get given it at the last possible
it's one of the
minute.
best kept secrets until you start to actually perform it. I mean, we've been having a lot of problems with the scripts lately because they get later and later, and that's the writer's thing, you know.
Of course.
Don't get me started on writers, you know, and you know, they're great, they're wonderful, but they're late. They get 9 months to make the program, and finally we're saying, oh, we've just finished episode whatever it is now, and it's coming to you. You start filming on Monday, and we're supposed to do instant acting.
Of course,
you know.
right,
I mean, and the lack of understanding of what we do as actors just drives me nuts.
Well, you're just tools for
exactly.
the vision, for the vision of the writer. Yes, exactly.
For the vision, and that's what we have to do. And
know your place.
You know your place, exactly. It's very it's what's the word? You know, everybody in their place.
Of course. But did you know? I mean, did you know early on?
Well, I did. You know, when they did the pitch to me, I mean, it was a pitch actually. It was not a script.
Right.
And I was here. Actually, I live in New York, but I have a place here. So I was in my flat here, and I got this phone call. My manager said, they're going to call you. They're interested in you for this show that they want to do. And Adam McKay, or we would say Mackay, but Adam McKay, I've never understood why they do that in America, but they do. Adam McKay and Jesse Armstrong, who's the show creator, is going to call you. Well, Jesse Armstrong was in Italy, Adam McKay was in LA, so we had a 3-way conversation. And they pitched the show to me, and I knew straight away, I thought, this is a winner. Because also, in you know, I mean, Jesse would hate this probably, but, you know, those shows have always been very successful. If you think of Dynasty, if you think of Dallas, you think of all those shows that have dealt with that, they've always worked. You know, Falcon Crest, they've always had a sort of value to them. So I knew that this show would work. At one level,
because of that dynamic.
Because of that dynamic,
right, okay.
You know, and it's a great dynamic. And of course, in Jesse's hands, it's
phenomenal.
It's phenomenal because he is a phenomenal writer, and he's tough as old get out. I mean, he's a tough guy. Oh yeah. He doesn't appear to be, but he is.
He gets what he wants.
He gets what he wants. He's a man who gets what he wants, you know, and he does what he wants as well. So there's no getting around that, and that's fine because that feeds you. And Logan is a great role, and I think I've also brought something to it in a way that was not necessarily originally there. That came more and more as I became involved with the role. And that's why I have great empathy for Logan. I don't see him as the villain that everybody else sees him as. Well, naturally, I wouldn't see him as a villain because you don't judge your character. It would be fatal to do that.
And again, as run through this whole conversation, it's very, very much a community piece, an ensemble piece.
That's right. And that's the great strength of our group.
Absolutely.
You know, we have an amazing group, and we have, you know, actors like McFadden, Sarah Snook, Jeremy Strong, lovely Kieran. I mean, they're all so extraordinary. Alan Rock, you know, they're just a great group to work with, and that'll be the saddest thing when the show eventually comes to an end is the people I've been working with, and that's always a sad thing. When anything ends, it's the people you've been working with. It's not so much the venture; it's the community again that you've been part of or you've created.
You talk about having sympathy or empathy for the character Logan Roy. That's why some of the obvious attempts to make it about the Murdochs or about Rupert Murdoch, that's where they fail, isn't it? Because
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, James, because I think that's absolutely true. I think that the point is they're not the Murdochs.
No.
They are a little bit more aware than the Murdochs, and that's what makes it that's what gives it more edge. So that Logan knows that he's made choices in his life. in the same way that John Caldwell has made choices in his life, and you stand and fall by those choices. It's not for one to judge what those choices are. It's for one to accept that these are his set of circumstances, and you have to acknowledge those set of circumstances and understand that that's part of the human dilemma, that we achieve harmony through considerable cost, but it's worth it. And I think that that's what's so interesting about Logan. I have a great empathy for Logan because I see Logan's journey as one of deprivation.
Yeah.
I don't see it as, I think he is deprived, even though he seems to be the richest man in the world, but he's a very angry man. And he's very angry because there's something that's missing at the fundament of his life, which is love and care that he never had. He had certainly had this mother, but when he went to, the idea was that he was initially the guy was born in Quebec, Canada, and then they changed it and they had him born in Dundee, which they only changed on the 9th episode of the first series. When they came and said, Peter Friedman said, "Oh, by the way, they've changed your birthplace." And I went, "What? They've changed your birthplace?" I said, "You're no longer born in Quebec." Now, I always thought it was odd I was born in Quebec anyway, because I'm not sure if Jesse's very good at geography, because originally he said it's an American carriage. He's American. As far as I know, Quebec is in Canada.
Still.
So he would be Canadian.
Yes.
But that came to me late, because I was playing an American, and then I discovered he was born in Quebec. And then he said, "Oh, you left Quebec very early." I said, "Oh, so
he doesn't remember Quebec.
He doesn't remember. So I went, "Oh, that's fine." But then when they suddenly, on the 9th episode, Peter Friedman said, "They've changed your birthplace." And I said, "So, what do you mean they changed my birthplace?" He said, "You're no longer born in Quebec." I said, "So where am I born?" And he had to go to his device. I said, "Oh, I can't remember." He went to his device and said, "Oh yeah, here it is. You're born in somewhere called Dundee, Scotland."
How funny.
And I said,
delightful.
I said, "But that's where I was born." And then he said, "Oh, that's a coincidence." I said, "That's a hell of a coincidence." I said, "What is he talking about?" I mean, he's born. I'm not born in Dundee. And then I went to Jeremy and Jesse, and I said, and he said, "Oh, we thought it'd be a little. This is writer's fight. We thought it'd be a little surprise, And so, I mean, they do talk to you as if you're about 3 years old and you've just got a bunch of sweeties in your stocking or something at
Pat him
Christmas.
on the head, give him a biscuit. He'll be all right. Off you go.
Exactly.
Go and do your acting.
Go and do your acting. Exactly. And I just thought, wait a minute. And then he said,
that's lovely.
and then he said what he said about Quebec, but he left Dundee very early. So I went, "Oh, I see."
But it's fascinating to hear you describe that because the character is searching for a hole, to fill a hole. He doesn't even acknowledge the existence of the hole. You couldn't be more different. You're a very fulfilled man.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, I still have my...
Of course you do.
I still have my...
But there's not a gaping hunger inside you.
No, not at all. I mean, there never was.
No, that's what I thought.
No, there was never a gaping hunger. I mean, I'm very blessed. I mean, whatever that means. But I've been very lucky, even though I had the most... Really, if you look at it, terrible childhood,
Yes, of course.
But I never felt that. I just felt that this was part of the journey. And then I had to just say... I didn't want. There was no point changing carriages. The carriage was overcrowded, and that was the way it was.
You got to crack on.
For that
we
bit.
Come then to the final questions. The two final questions. You talk about the journey in professional terms. I couldn't even begin. We'd need another hour just to list your CV, and then I'd probably have forgotten half of it. But do you
like me?
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you that actually. Whether sometimes you go, "Oh yeah, I was in that."
Yeah. Well, somebody said to me the other night. They said, "Oh, you were in Perfect Scoundrels." And somebody was saying, "I'm about to direct my first movie." So I was meeting the guy who's going to possibly be I think he will be my first assistant. And he said, "Oh yeah, we worked together before many years ago on a show called Perfect Scoundrels." And I went, "Perfect Scoundrels?" What? He said, "With Peter Bowles."
Yes.
And I said, "Oh, Peter Bowles." Well, I knew Peter quite well.
Yeah.
I said, and then "Oh yeah, perfect." I'd forgotten all about that.
Fantastic. Do you have standout moments? You must have answered this question many times, but
in career-wise,
yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, my, working with Lindsay was a big standout moment for me, and learning to be You know, his great note to me was, you know, after at the opening act play we had in Celebration, it's a son who comes back and he's had a nervous breakdown, the son. And ironically, he's a careers officer at a school, which is one of the ironies, he's a nervous breakdown. So he comes back to the family, and he hasn't been there for some time, so he has to walk into the house and remember this house that he hasn't visited for probably a couple of years.
Right.
And Lindsay made me do it again and again and again. And eventually Lindsay said, "Oh, Brian, don't just do something, stand there." You know, and it was a great note because it meant that I just didn't have to work it. I just had to be it. Yeah. And that was a great moment for me in my career. And then later on, when I discovered my other element to me, which is my Scottish side, which is much more to do with those extraordinary actors like Duncan McRae, Fulton Mackay, wonderful actor called Callum Mill, who were brilliant comedians. They were brilliant comic actors, but they always had this sort of rigor about them as actors. And physicality, they were quite physical. So I remember going to India and doing the Scottish play, and I had this Katak girl, she was 16, she was a kid, she was my dresser, and she said, she was very, very praiseworthy, but she said, "You know, Mr. Coates, I watch your work and I feel that you want to move more."
Oh, wow.
And I went, "Oh, really?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I had to stand in the wings and watch me do the scene. And eventually she had me crawling all over the floor. And it was such a...
How old were you?
How old was I? I was 30...
Gosh.
35, 34. Right. And I had it was a great revelation. And then 7 or 8 years later, I worked with Deborah Warner, and this was a really standout thing. And I did Titus Andronicus, which is a play nobody ever touches.
No, it's horrible.
Because it's
horribly good.
It's an incredible play, but people don't go near it.
No.
So I was given the role, and we couldn't get a director for it. We got people that wanted to do it, but they wanted to do something else. And then Deborah Warner came along, and that was a major thing in my theatre career.
I could carry on this part of the conversation forever, but and I think you've alluded to what your next answer might be with your next project, but do you have any ambitions left?
Yeah, well, I want to direct my first movie.
It's exciting.
Which I hope I can live. I live long enough to do it. No, I'm going to do that next year. I'm in the process of, we've had the green light from Lionsgate, and it's kind of nerve-wracking because when you're waiting for a movie to get made, you're very excited. Mm-hmm. And then it happens, and you go, now what?
Jump.
Now what?
Yeah. And
it's the writer is a guy I've worked with for many years called David Ashton, and I did a series on the radio because the radio it's my favourite medium, is the radio, because you don't have to wear makeup, you don't have to learn your lines.
Tell me about it.
You don't have to do any of that. So I did this series called McCleavey, which was about a Scottish detective in Edinburgh, which was a huge, we used to get 1 million listeners, and I'd done that over a number of years. And he and this producer actually he's known us both for years, and he said he commissioned this script, and it's our love letter to Scotland. So it's about a family-owned distillery in Scotland, which is difficult because so far I've approached some actors, and some of the actors I've approached, I won't say no names, no Packville, are alcoholics or recovering alcoholics. So it's kind of weird that it's a bit I'd forgotten about.
You can't put temptation in their way.
No, you can't put, they wouldn't necessarily want to be with something that was about a distillery.
Thank you. We'll look out for that. The new TV show, How the Other Half Live, with Brian Cox. Do we know when it's out? Is it
tomorrow night?
And it will be available then, of course.
Yeah, it's on Paramount Plus.
On the platforms. Brian Cox, thank you so much.
Thank you. What a delight.